Let's go ahead and get things rolling. So first, I want to quickly introduce myself. I'm Keegan Cotton. I'm the Director of Customer Success for the Americas and APAC region here at Guesty. And this is my headshot that I thought sideburns were a good look for me at the time. So that's a little gift to everyone today. With me, I have two wonderful guests. I have the connectivity partner business manager from Booking.com, Kathryn Cervantes, and the director of data and analytics from Key Data, Melanie Brown. So thank you, Kathryn and Melanie, for joining us today. We did a review earlier the week, and both panelists have a lot of exciting stuff to share. And so I'm stoked to go through everyone's presentation today. Just as a quick overview of what the presentation will be, I'm going to go ahead and start by discussing some trends that Guesty's strategy team has put together just by collating a number of data points from partner OTAs, from industry leaders like Skift, just to kind of get a view of certain emerging trends that we're seeing going into 2023. I'll then invite our panelists to share their own industry predictions for the year, as well as talk through consumer behaviors, key metrics, and where we could be heading in 2023. And then finally, we'll kick off the panel discussion where we'll have time to answer some questions that we've come up with beforehand or any questions that come through from the audience. So we'll go ahead and start with the little appetizer here, the data and trends aperitif for this webinar today. So as I mentioned, the Guesty strategy team took a couple of data points from external sources, our own internal data, just to do an overview to see where do we think the industry is going to be headed this year, 2023. So the first trend that I'd like to talk about is the continued merging of the traditional hospitality industry with the short-term rental market, which is particularly prominent in urban and luxury markets. So the folks at Skift call this the Great Merge, and it's something that we've begun to see in the last couple of years, where the lines between what's considered a traditional hotel and what's considered a short-term rental property are beginning to get more and more blurred. This was accelerated by COVID, but many guests are looking for the privacy and space that a short-term rental provides, but they're still wanting to receive the same level of service and care of a top hotel. So what can we expect from the Great Merge this year? So we're anticipating to see both types of accommodation, STR and hotels, continuing to adopt elements of each other, leading to more refined and sophisticated spaces. Classic hotel standards are becoming challenged, with operators pushing for interior makeovers and modern designs. The cookie cutter crusty sheets approach isn't really working anymore for hotels because standards are changing. On the STR side, guests are having increasing standards and pushing property managers and hosts in the STR space to really upgrade and renovate themselves so they don't see themselves falling behind the competition. Furthermore, hotels and STRs are directly competing for the same guests. It's not in the past where someone was very much like, I'm done with the hotel space. I'm only doing short-term rentals moving forward, or I think being in an STR is being amongst the people and I'm an elite and I want to stay in the hotel. We don't really see those personas so much anymore. They're more viewed as two sides of the same coin. So in response, like I said before, many hotels are beginning to adopt those characteristics of STR accommodations and vice versa. On the other side of the coin, STR standardization is becoming increasingly popular as they look to increase professionalism in order to build stronger brands. While COVID has made it difficult, 2023 could serve as the year that short-term rental standardization really comes into play, with luxury amenities, branded toiletries, and other little touches that give the guest trust in the credibility of your brand and the standard of service they may receive from an STR, feeling less that they're staying in like someone's second home that is lived in, and more so an actual professionally managed short-term rental that is anticipating to have guests stay in it regularly. The topic raised the thought that in 10 years' time, will guests really be able to differentiate between these two models and the implications that really could have for our industry overall. So moving on to our second trend here. As travelers start expecting more from their accommodation than just a place to stay, 2023 is likely to become the year of experiences. Vacationers want to plan their holidays not just on what activities they're going to do close to their destination, whether that be like a wine tour or a cooking class or a local art exhibition or something along those lines. But they'll also be on the lookout for exclusive properties from unique architecture, design, as the property itself becomes part of the travel experience. I always hate this word, but Instagrammability is still increasingly on the day at short-term rental. And then lastly, the third trend that I wanted to go through is digital nomads continuing to become more and more mainstream. I was actually talking to my girlfriend about this last night as we're considering doing this ourselves. So unless you've been under a rock for the past 2 years, you've probably heard the term in a number of webinars at conferences of the digital nomad. The concept of not just traveling for travel purposes, but working from a different location. And several countries have already created a digital nomad visa, actually, facilitating logistics for these types of travelers. As this number continues to rise, property owners will have to adjust their offering and meet guest expectations of finding not just a home away from home, but an office away from an office. So ensuring that these amenities that we've been talking about for quite some time now for the digital nomad, ensuring that you have high-speed Wi-Fi so that even if it is a treehouse locale that you have, you're still able to work long-term from that location. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Melanie Brown, like I said, the Director of Data and Analytics at Key Data, to the stage to look back on Q4 2022 and in future facing into 2023 from a slightly different angle. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and kick it over to you, Melanie.
Okay. So like Keegan said, I'm the Director of Data and Analytics at Key Data Dashboard. We aggregate data from a variety of different sources. Kind of most importantly, we work directly with property managers around the world, and then also scrape Airbnb, VRBO, and Booking.com on a daily basis to aggregate and show what's happening in the vacation rental market. My team does a lot of writing and speaking about trends in the space, so excited to be here to share some of those insights with you all today. So as Keegan kind of alluded to, I'm also going to look back at the fourth quarter of last year. It's when we really started to see some trends kind of start shifting in a lot of markets. It's a tough time to start making predictions for what 2023 will look like, just because there's been so much volatility over the last couple of years. I think one benefit or one thing we have going for us right now is that we've kind of achieved somewhat of an equilibrium in the last few months, where we're ahead of 2019, so pre-pandemic, but behind 2020 and 2021, depending on the market. Of course, all of us are still curious to see how changing economic conditions play out in the vacation rental space. Thus far, we've not seen huge drop-offs in bookings. People seem to be continuing to travel despite maybe lower expendable income and higher prices of goods over time. And so we'll continue to monitor it, but definitely want to share some of the changes that we're seeing with you all today. So first trend to keep an eye on in 2023 is the occupancy rate. Here we're looking at our direct data, so directly from property managers. Our adjusted paid occupancy rate is the number of guest nights booked out of nights available to be rented. So we take away owner stays and holds. So Q4, most countries around the world had higher occupancy rates in Q4 of 2022 than they did in 2021. So some big standouts here were Canada and England, with increases in occupancy rates of 30 to 50%. In the US, however, we did see the occupancy rate start to slow a little bit. So from 41% occupied in Q4 of 2021 to 37% occupied in Q4 of 2022, which is a year-over-year change of about 11% down. In all of this, the important context to keep in mind is that some markets, some countries, even some local markets within the same country were recovered from COVID, from pandemic shutdowns at different rates. So the US was one of the first countries to open back up. So they saw this huge increase in travel again. We're starting to again, find that equilibrium. And a post-pandemic is a weird phrase to use, but in a post-pandemic restrictions world, at least in the US. So Q4 was primarily increased occupancy for a lot of countries. Again, we're starting to see that tide shift a little bit. Q1, you're going to find more red arrows of people having lower occupancy rates than at this time last year. Again, a handful of exceptions with moderate increases like Canada, Mexico, and Spain. Some of these markets, though, are pretty significantly down in terms of bookings for Q1. Both of these data points are pacing data. So we're looking at reservations on the books as of January 10th for last year. We're not comparing this year on the books to last year final. So US down about 15%, Australia down 21%. France is having one of the largest declines. Important to keep in mind with all of this, though, is that booking windows for Q1 are usually pretty short. So France has a 30-ish day booking window. There's still plenty of time for that to turn around, right? You're going from 17 to 9%, not from 60% to 20%. So takeaway is performance still varied by country. That US bubble of vacation rental high occupancy rates is burst, but remains ahead of 2019. And again, that tide has kind of started to turn in the last couple of months. So takeaway, monitor changing demand in your market and adjust prices accordingly as occupancies go into. Again, the US was kind of one of the first markets to bounce back, so it can be helpful for the rest of the world to kind of understand what's going on there too. In general, we saw a pretty similar trend across countries in 2022. So here we're looking at the dark blue line is last year. The dotted line is 2021 above that, and the dashed line is 2019. So the year started off really strong in the US, and it started dropping below 2021 around April and through the rest of the year, but again has remained ahead of 2019. So point of that is always perspective is helpful. In a lot of countries, we're still ahead of where we were pre-pandemic, even if we're not where we were at that peak travel, peak vacation rental occupancy in kind of the summer of 2021. And again, this is just the US on the screen, but we've seen the same trend happen in a lot of different countries by now. And of course, occupancy is really two different indicators put together, right? It's demand, the number of guest nights booked over the number of nights available. So something we've seen is demand has stayed strong, but supply has surged in a lot of markets. So we're looking at the Q4 supply growth from, this would have been 2021 to 2022. Sorry, my label on that axis is wrong. So the total nights available in Q4 increased by 27% year over year in Australia, 43% in Brazil, 42% in Canada, and so on, 17% year over year in the US. In a lot of markets and a lot of places, we saw second homeowners decide, hey, like I'm not working in the city, maybe I should go stay in my short-term rental full time. They took that inventory off the market in 2020, 2021. It came back in 2022. Similarly, revenues were so high that investors got really excited and started buying properties with the sole purpose of them being short-term rentals. And so some of this is new inventory. Some of this is a return to normal inventory levels where they were in 2019, pre-pandemic kind of drop in supply. So supply has surged in a lot of regions and markets, and it's starting to overtake demand growth. So even though demand is still really high, people are still traveling, now there are more vacation rentals for them to choose from. And in addition to that, hotels are back in action. And so you're really facing increased competition. That's when it's time to start looking at the trends Keegan talked about. Are your short-term rentals set up for work from home? Do they compete with hotels in terms of amenities, cleaning, linen policies, things like that? And are your rates competitive? How do you make sure people choose your vacation rental over somebody else's or a hotel's? So takeaway, stay competitive with all these other short-term rentals in your market. Demand is high, but again, now they could be choosing somebody else. Which leads us to our second trend, which is pricing. So Q4, while occupancy was increasing, we started to see some moderate year-over-year declines in rates. So Australia and Canada, where they were seeing these huge year-over-year increases in occupancy, rates started to drop a little bit. Spain had no rate change. In the US, we were still pushing rates, so year-over-year up 5%. This is an interesting dynamic we're seeing, though, going into Q1, as rates are still significantly higher than last year in a lot of markets. I've talked with people who work with our property managers on a one-to-one basis. What they're seeing, what we're seeing in the data, is people seem to be leaving rates pretty high going into the future. So if you're looking at spring or summer, a lot of managers are leaving their rates high and then choosing to adjust them as we get closer to the arrival dates. So right now, rates look super strong for Q1, which is the data we have here. Q2 in the summer, but we expect to see those rates start coming down a little bit to keep pushing occupancy up. So softening demand forced some rate decreases during Q4. Again, Q rates are remaining slightly higher than last year. So keep making those moderate rate adjustments. It's also really important to know what your booking window is, which is the average or the time between a guest making a reservation and arriving. So that way you know when to expect those reservations to start coming in. If they're not, then take a look at your rates because that may be what's going on. So in the US, we always recommend, hey, look at your ski markets. If you're a summer market, it can be helpful to look at winter markets to know how they're adjusting and adapting and what consumers are doing ahead of when they really start booking for spring and summer stays. So I'm located in Colorado. It's been some really interesting dynamics in the Colorado ski markets over the last couple of years. So again, just as an example, we're looking at average daily rates for Q1 on the books on the top. By these a handful of different ski markets in Colorado, and then occupancy rate pacing on the bottom. What we saw is Colorado ski markets and a lot of markets could really push rates last year because they were seeing this huge resurgence in demand and year-over-year increases in occupancy. Rate increases for Q1 this year are much more moderate. So if we look at a place like Aspen, their average daily rate increased by 41% from Q1 2021 to Q1 2022. This year, though, rates are about 3% lower, and they're not seeing that huge year-over-year increase in occupancy. So as we're all curious, how are travelers going to react? How price sensitive are they? Look for some of those winter markets in your area and see if people are continuing to book, if they're booking those big houses at high rates, or if prices are starting to come down a little bit. Put occupancy and rates together, and now we can look at revenue, which is another trend to keep an eye on in 2023. So again, some similar trends here where Q4 stayed pretty strong in a lot of markets with increases in RevPAR. You get RevPAR by multiplying your occupancy rate times your nightly price, or your nightly rate booked, your average daily rate, and that's an indicator of the average amount of revenue generated per night available. So US was down about 6% in Q4 of 2022. A lot of markets were way up. Same trend here. We start looking at Q1. Revenues are coming down a little bit. So 20% lower in Australia, 12% lower year over year in England, 11% lower in the US. Because in the US, we've kind of seen that 10% behind last year for a few months now. So revenues in some markets are dropping from their peak. So takeaway here, again, you're probably still outpacing 2019. Be prepared for conversations with owners. We've heard from a lot of people, they're struggling with first-time owners in particular who came on the market in 2022 or 2021, had these huge revenue years, and it's not quite living up to their expectation. And other stakeholders in your business as well. Know this is normal, right? You can improve your strategies, marketing, revenue management to help make sure your revenues don't drop off a cliff. But again, that context can be helpful of, okay, it's not necessarily something I'm doing wrong, especially when you're communicating with owners. The markets are shifting again. Okay, that was a lot of data. So key takeaways, pricing right now. Occupancy rates are falling some. Travelers are more price sensitive and supply is increasing. So your competition is back and people are really paying attention to that effect on their wallets. How do you do this? Again, monitor those booking windows as they return to normal. Don't count on those last minute stays anymore because they may not materialize. Keep an eye on your competitors. How are your competitors pricing? What are they doing? How are they responding? And then find a balance between occupancy and rates using RevPAR. To some extent, keeping prices high, as long as it doesn't have a huge impact on occupancy, can keep your revenues high, but you don't want to increase your rates to the point where your occupancy is lowering to the point where your revenue is really down. And of course, you're going to need market data for all of this. Key data is here to help. We have that, lots of other good sources for market data, including some of your PMSs as well. Okay, thank you. And you can find us at keydata-dashboard.com if you have more questions or want more information.
Thanks, Melanie. Just as a quick plug, because I saw this question come through in the Q&A, if you are interested in looking at any of this data in Guesty, if you are a Guesty user today, You can view a lot of these metrics like RevPAL, occupancy, ADR, booking window through our advanced analytics functionality. You're able to get a reverse-facing view of your booking window, so you can actually see these specific trends that Melanie is referring to, where we're anticipating to see an increasingly shrinking booking window of 0 to 7 days from check-in, as that became a huge trend coming out of 2020. It's now starting to recede back, and you can see that for yourself in your data. Now we're going to go ahead and hand it over to Kathryn Cervantes. Kathryn, over to you.
Hey, thanks for having me. I might have shared my screen too soon, got too excited, but yeah, great plug for all that. Excited to be here today talking to you on behalf of Booking.com for the travel trends we've been identifying. I've been booking for quite some years and worked closely with Guesty, looking to provide the optimal connection and seamless experience for our mutual users. So yeah, excited to be here again. Just a quick little bit plug a bit about Booking.com. So this is our company mission, making it easier for everyone to experience the world. And going a step beyond that, our partner promise is really making it easier for everyone to experience the world through technology. So our product teams are dedicated to finding solutions and innovations to challenges. We know there's no shortage of them and a lot of opportunities for improvements, especially among the short-term rental world. Guesty is also a key partner in that. So we have a lot of automated onboarding, real-time connectivity, and there's been a lot of developments in the past, and plans for the future are super exciting. One more thing I want to mention here, and it's really interesting too, is I think kind of building off what Keegan was saying about the continued expansion or kind of merging of the blended traditional hospitality with short-term rentals. We've had a huge marketing reach, and it's been a big priority of ours. Last year actually marked the comeback of our Booking.yeah campaign. You may notice Idris Elba has been shown in all kinds of accommodations. So he's in a cabin, he's in a hotel, he's on the plane, so transport, all kinds of travel as a whole. But really, we fully believe that there is that blend of guest booking, different kinds of accommodations, depending on the stay and what's right for them at that time. We see a lot of that crossover, and that's something we're going to continue to promote as well. So first, to take a bit of a quick look back at the trends that we saw emerge at the end of 2022, and we do see these are going to kind of continue on so far into 2023, and we expect them to continue doing so. So there's definitely a lot of pent-up demand we've been hearing today and kind of seeing in the market. For us, at least last year, it got back to beyond 2019 levels, with the US leading the way. However, we did see growth from all regions, including APAC, as Asia started to really begin its recovery run. From that, we saw these 4 emerging traveler types that I'm going to highlight today. So starting with international travel, that has been historically our kind of strength, bread and butter, bringing guests over from Europe or even within Europe. And we've done pretty well domestically the last few years. We've seen that local traveler, that range. And now, however, 61% of our searches are for international travel on our platform, which has been a pretty significant increase. So a couple things to consider here. Potentially the influx of domestic guests that had been taking advantage of that local travel the last couple of years are now looking to go overseas, potentially overseas, or just travel further. So that means it's a good time for hosts and property managers to think about attracting guests from further afield as well. This can be a delicate one as travel is entirely now. I think, rates have been strong in most cases. ADR has been strong. If you compare to things like currency evaluations, we know the euro's pretty close in parity to the US dollar today. Guests may be facing significant increases. So as we've seen, this won't stop people from traveling. The demand is still there, but it could affect how to think of strategy. They consider things like seasonality or what might be effective in attracting these types of international guests, potentially targeted rates or country or region specific promotions if you want to encourage those, like maybe longer stays or the kind of behaviors that come along with those guests traditionally. The second group we identified is families with children. So this usually peaks in the summer, where almost a third of our summer searches are done by families. And we continue to look for ways to improve that booking process and capture more of that family demand. It can be a bit tricky. Again, this is another one where there's opportunity too to set clarity for just what's available on site once they get there. So we're going to continue working on bringing demand in from families. And I think what I would recommend here for hosts to take advantage of some key elements in the listing, such as like security, safety, and cleanliness. Of course, we expect those to be continued to be a trend and something very important to guests. The third one is solo and group. So that's our third group. In 2022, we saw 22% of global travelers searching with a group of friends, whereas 53% made plans as a couple, still the highest volume, and 17% went solo. So here I would suggest targeted prices per occupancy just to maximize the relevance in searches, would take advantage of those variances of types of individuals. And then finally, the people are yearning for some new adventures, changing up their patterns. The long stay guest has emerged here. So over half of searches on our platform are for 3 to 7 days. For us, it's a bit of a long stay, considering kind of, again, the traditional starting off with a shorter of 2-3 nights. However, there's also an increased demand for the upper level of long stays. And for us, not new for the industry, but new for us, so last year we started selling the ability to search for up to 90 nights. And we did see some really positive results from those as soon as it launched globally, some strong like 30 to 90 day range. So here I would suggest looking into weekly rates, monthly rates, anything to kind of capture and they take advantage of those longer guests. So just across the board kind of takeaways here, the thing that translates all groups is travelers are savvier than ever, especially they're looking for deals, looking at what the policies are, looking at the space. And yeah, I think guests are staying at all kinds of units. So that's something that transcends all types of travelers. So we've definitely seen a bit of a mood shift from one of hopeful uncertainty to bold adaptability. So 2022 was about triumphant return to travel. We believe 2023 will be about creatively reimagining it amidst the chaos. So Booking commissioned research with more than 24,000 travelers across 32 countries, and then combined it with our 25 years of travel expertise. And I'm going to go through a couple of these predictions and the results of that survey for 2023. Yeah, so again, the overall takeaway is despite the unease, this year's predictions reflect an overwhelming growing optimism about travel. 72% of the participants have believed that despite these feelings of instability, travel will always be worth it. And the predictions reflect this sentiment. So there are definitely needs of travelers moving into different directions. So there's a bit of a kind of conflicting, and we have to be a little bit comfortable in those contradictions is kind of what we're finding from this. So the first one, this is interesting, nostalgia. Nostalgia was the top result that what guests are seeking. It came in with almost 90% of participants seeking to relive their glory days in 2023. So I know we've been hearing about even beyond travel, the tech rebounds, digital detoxes, looking for a bit of escapism. And that shows here as well. A quarter of the participants, especially I think Muslims from the US, are seeking to escape to a pre-digital era and evoke memories. This doesn't just mean being completely off the grid or camping. There's a desire for local experiences and a craving for just being present. That also came from the second part of this, 54% put family reunion or multi-generational trip at the top of the agenda for this year. So of course, being offline is hard to achieve completely. I think what a takeaway would be here is guests are looking for, and for our partners as well, looking for ease of experience, really leveraging that technology, things like making it easy to complete the booking, using apps, using mobile rates. If they're on the road trips, you can book quickly that way. I personally just prefer using our app all the time. I think it's faster to book with. So I would just recommend things like using payments by booking, anything that's going to take the operational hassle out of really just getting it off the ground and making sure the guests are easy set up for success as soon as they arrive. So yeah, the business and leisure blending is something we talk about quite a bit too. I know Keegan mentioned it. I also personally did a bit of digital nomading early on in the lockdown phases in 2020. Highly recommended if you can swing it to happen. What's interesting from the responses here is that guests are looking as well to preserve that kind of vacation time for themselves. So we see a bit of a mix. For sure, there's about half of the participants surveyed said they're not interested in working while they're away and would consider clocking in if it was for a company retreat or trip. And there is a really big sentiment wanting that from companies, wanting that time to connect. So we believe there will be a bit of a rise of business retreats and some destination trips for really working on relationship and strengthening bonds. But again, it's interesting to see that sentiment because this is what the survey responds. We also do, however, see quite a bit of stay patterns showing that there is business travel, there is weekday patterns, that those guests are the business travelers bringing their families with them. You can tell by the types of properties they're renting, and again, the stay patterns, the history there. So, home units, short-term rentals are set up really well for this, have the space and have the flexibility too sometimes. So I would say here, it's really interesting in looking at the, at least with Booking, we have a work-friendly program. So you can really highlight those amenities that are available, such as a dedicated workspace, be that a desk, a table, somewhere comfortable to sit. And I also recommend putting that in the content as well, just really showing that's available. Occupancy-based pricing can be relevant here if you can, have target some rates for family or a solo traveler, for sure. Good to keep in mind. Saving the splurge is a fun one. About half of travelers say that investing in a vacation remains a top priority. However, being budget conscious is key. So 68% of travelers continue to spotlight travel while seeking more bang for their buck. We do predict that people will be spending or planning travel with their budgets a bit more tightly, planning on taking advantage of deals, smartly time travel, prioritizing value for money, and planning further in advance. So again, I think we have seen a bit of that book window shift, which we've heard about a little earlier too from both of these great presenters. So yeah, I think leveraging those long-term, short-term book windows with maybe a couple some dynamic pricing, I would say it's always great to have a flexible policy as well as a restrictive policy in place. That way you can kind of yield based on that. We do see some sensitivity around travel. And on that note, would also recommend really just, being safe and being protective. Booking is now offering liability insurance. We do recommend putting in, like, reviewing your damage policies and damage deposits, leveraging those tools in a smart way that's going to set you up for success. And the last one I'm going to mention here is just kind of a fun one. We saw a rise, 42% of US travelers reported they'll be turning to virtual reality this year to be inspired for vacation choices. That felt high to me personally. I would love to see if travel truly does enter the metaverse and kind of expand further into that in 2023. I think the big takeaway here is we've already seen how social media has shifted. I think I planned a lot of my last trip on TikTok personally. It's just super fun and easy to see, great to see a lot of things. So I think the big takeaway here is content, high quality content, photos, even if you're not in the metaverse, but guests are really looking to get a great feel and have clear expectations before they get to that property. I think just having high quality content is the key to that. So overall, some takeaways, definitely I'd say lean into available products with us, with your key partners, as well as with Guesty. We know there's a lot out there. Some ones that I really recommend looking into are payment side booking, where we can facilitate all of that to help decrease fraud. We don't want to use the F word, but booking would deal with all the fraud in that case or manage those guests, also take on the responsibility of chargebacks, and it really is a great seamless product. Also, again, I mentioned dynamic pricing a couple times, leveraging flexible policies as well as restrictive ones. And again, mobile friendly is really great too. Mobile rates are also something that can be used strategically, right? So turn them on for a weekend or during low season, or really it can be something used to just be flexible with or kind of fluid with. The business and leisure trend will be one that's very interesting to watch. Truly, like weekly rates and monthly rates to capture those long stay guests, something that can be quite effective and also set you up for success too. Definitely check into the work friendly program, where that one will also pick up on amenities that are already selected. So again, having great content, full content, all those details outlined will automatically fill that in and show guests what you have available. The last thing is just, we have to take some comfort in contradictions for this year. It would be really interesting to watch it play out. I think using some other specific opportunities that play into your strategy and again fit your needs. So we do offer things such as geo-targeted offers, like state or country rates. If there is somebody in Colorado, at the last minute to fill some 1 or 2 night stays in those ski towns, that could be a great thing to leverage, or from neighboring states. Again, these things can be used and layered in to fit with your strategy. Overall, I mentioned damage program, damage policies and deposits. We think that's something great to take advantage of, protect yourself, protect the guests as well with liability insurance. And overall, I think one thing I didn't talk about yet, but sustainability, we're seeing guests really show an interest in that and looking to stay at sustainable properties. So we have some great tools to just show what your properties are doing, and definitely it's a good chance to promote it. So overall content, as well as pricing, and just being playful with what you have available. So overall, this final takeaway, I think if anything, if the last years have taught us anything about travel, it's that it shouldn't be taken for granted. So these predictions really show that undercurrent of intentional paradoxical behaviors, and hopefully it'll put us in a more comfortable driving seat amidst the instability. Cool, and that's it for me.
Awesome. I don't think I've ever heard in a webinar in the short-term rental space the word paradoxical. So I appreciate that.
I can't believe I got it out, so it worked.
But I want to go ahead and since Kathryn just spoke, let's jump back to Melanie for a question here. Obviously, we have a large audience here spanning a bunch of different geos. Are you seeing any particular geographical trends emerging in this current time frame? In this, are we in a recession? Are we not? Inflation is crazy. What's going on? Are some areas doing better than others right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's always variation across markets. It's something that makes my job really hard because it's hard to say like, here are the overall trends, but also here are all the exceptions. I think that was true in 2020, where there was a ton of variation as markets were opening up at different times. We've seen more similar trends across geographies recently. So obviously I showed a lot of national level data. That showed some of those differences between markets. I think we'll make slides available to everybody so you can go back. So it's kind of a two-part answer. First of all, it really depends on how quickly they've bounced back from COVID, how local governments kind of approached COVID regulations, how local people responded. That's going to play more into kind of those year-over-year shifts. Again, like in the US, we can have a 10% decline in occupancy, but still outpace 2019. In the US, we're seeing some variations. I spoke to how important supply has been for vacation rental occupancy rates. In the US, a lot of the variation between markets has come from rental regulations in the past 18 months, where a lot of markets are capping the number of like rental permits that are issued, or they're even requiring rental permits for the first time. So some markets have slowed down that supply growth, which has kept occupancy rates higher. And then urban versus leisure still plays into this. Again, all of this is interconnected. So in the US, I was looking this morning, cities are still more occupied than they were last year during the first quarter of 2022. A lot of leisure markets are lower. Again, those leisure markets bounce back quickly. Cities are just continuing to come back. In Europe, the cities are less occupied than they were at this time last year. So there's definitely some general, like occupancy rates are mostly down, rates are starting to be adjusted, supply is increasing. But it really all does depend on your local market. So keep finding data for your own geography and then your inventory types as well.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Melanie. I think I like that you didn't just say like, here's the 3 areas doing best. You actually gave the justification for what determines if an area has been doing well or not. So that kind of empowers everyone to go see, hey, what have the regulations looked like in this areas surrounding me? Maybe you have neighboring geos that you haven't considered marketing to before because they seem far away, but they have high restrictions of STRs. So you might actually be more desirable for multiple markets as a result of that. Kathryn, before kicking a question to you, it looks like we got a question from the Q&A that says, do you find there's a specific short-term booking site that does better than others? I wanted to kind of answer this and see if you two had any thoughts on this. What I found just from Guesty's perspective, where we're connected to as many channels as we're able to connect to at this point, it's not so much that one specific site does better than others. It's more so that it's rare for, let's say I'm a prospective guest. It's rare that I'm going to say, let me look on Airbnb, then let me look on booking.com, then let me look on Vrbo, then let me look on TripAdvisor. It's usually one specific entity has a preference of what channel they go to. And so that's why having your properties on multiple channels is such a valuable thing to do, because you're accessing unique audiences. Maybe not 100% unique, but you're increasing the number of impressions that your properties are receiving, which then naturally is in a higher amount of demand that you're accessing by diversifying your channels that you're presenting your properties on. So that's my non-answer answer to which is the best on my end. I don't know if you guys wanted to speak to that at all.
Yeah, as we pull reservations directly from property management systems, we can see where they're booked, which gives people a lot of good insight into that. Because not every PMS or data reporter would tell you. Okay, this one also depends on the market. I know the people I work with are probably so tired of me being like, it depends on the market. Make sure you say that, but it really does. Airbnb super strong in cities, Vrbo's stronger in leisure. Both of those are really strong in the US. internationally. Booking.com comes into play. Obviously, they're trying to get more of a share in the US as well. So it does vary, right? Property managers on the Outer Banks of North Carolina don't even list on Airbnb because Vrbo is like the place to do it, and they get a ton of direct bookings. Outside of that, you're so right, Keegan. When we look at the types of stays that are booked on Airbnb, they tend to be shorter stays, booked at lower rates, booked closer to arrival. VRBO, or like the 7-day classic vacation rental stays, booked at higher rates and booked 6 months to a year in advance. So it's not Airbnb or Vrbo or Booking that are like drawing or that are influencing people to book shorter stays at a shorter booking window. It's what you're saying, that it's the type of people looking on Airbnb or looking last minute, shorter stays, lower rates. Which makes it important to adjust your marketing strategy across those different sites. Obviously, channel management is really hard already, so we don't want to make it more complicated. But people are looking for different stay lengths and different types of stays across those sites, and so adjust what you can.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I'll just add, I think I'm biased, obviously, for this one. So
Maybe just
definitely Booking.com. Yeah, but I think you made a good point too. It's that we are very open and transparent with all of our partners. We are list with us, list with other sites, like list directly. We're not trying to take away from that. We believe that we're bringing in guests, and you can list with us and capture new or additional demand. That's really our goal. We're not trying to be exclusive or any kind of that's definitely not our key priority here. So I'd say it's worth experimenting and seeing what can fill your property, and also layering in those reservations. So definitely open that up.
Awesome. And I definitely want to capitalize on the fact that we have someone from Booking.com here, one of these channels, to kind of speak to that channel specifically. So Kathryn, my question for you is, what marketing strategies can PMCs and hosts implement in the new year to generate more bookings on Booking.com specifically, since that is your realm of expertise, as it were?
Yeah, that's a great one. And I mentioned Idris earlier. And so just by nature of working with Booking.com, the listing on our site, you're getting all the benefit of that marketing. So you're already included in those campaigns, those efforts, that these commercials that are driving in, as well as some digital marketing too. So that's happening. That's part of the built into the working with us. On top of that, there are some seasonal campaigns. So in let's say the promotion center, there are you could do opt into those, join those. They can be date specific. You can do blackout dates. So again, really making them work for you. But then those will be a part of additional marketing campaigns that go out to the guests. There's also things like leaning into some of the, badges and programs and tagging that we have. So the work friendly, being sustainable. There's also some dedicated, again, just for certain property types or market specific. So by having, again, that quality content, that will automatically be captured and used to reach the guest. So a lot of it you can do just by having a good quality listing and working with us. And then there are some additional ways to opt into seasonal campaigns or kind of periodic offers that we give as an opportunity. There's a couple other ones. I mentioned mobile a couple of times. That also can be done directly through Guesty now. So that's a big one. And there are some mobile specific offers that we promote as well. And we do also really highly promote the app. I think the Booking.com app was the most downloaded travel app I saw in, I believe, 2022, I think globally as well as in the US. So anything that will help visibility on the app is something I recommend as well.
If I'm a host that's overwhelmed by the number of options that you just gave, that was awesome. Just ran through, I want to say 6 or 7 different items.
I know.
Is there a good central repository, like a Booking.com help center, something within the extranet where a host could go to see all of the strategies available to them through Booking.com?
Yeah, absolutely. We also have an overwhelming amount of help articles. There's a help center. There's in the extranet for sure. There's also a market insights section you can go to. So really can help use that to support with decision making. And there's an opportunity center that will show and that's tailored. That's very much a dynamic list of opportunities that will be presented based on the property type, what you already have enabled, and kind of what we see as opportunities based on data-backed opportunities.
Awesome. Great.
And we have humans here too, so for sure reach out or contact us at any time.
All right. So we're actually getting a lot of questions through the Q&A, which is awesome. So I want to just run through these kind of collectively as a group. Are there competitors for Airbnb for mid-long-term rentals for digital nomads? From my perspective, I haven't seen a particular channel emerge as the champion of digital nomads. It's not so specific of a persona at this point that there's like digital.io, like come here to book your short-term rentals as a digital nomad. So right now, from the Guesty side, I'm not seeing any trends of one particular channel being overpowered for mid to long-term stays for digital nomads in particular. So in that case, I would say keep that marketing on all channels. I don't know if the two of you feel differently about that.
It sounds like you need to go grab that domain name, Keegan.
Yeah, wait just a tick. I might be onto something here. Awesome. Do we believe there will be a larger push and shift towards direct booking websites as there was in hotels a couple of years ago? Melanie or Kathryn, do either of you want to answer this? I have thoughts on it, but I don't want to just dominate the conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak first. Yeah, I mean, it's already happening depending on where you are. Obviously, I'm in the US. A lot of our customers are, so I'm a little more familiar with some of those campaigns in the US. And yeah, I mean, the Book Direct campaign has been huge. Right. I think there's the perceived or real, in some cases, more control over your reservations. You get guest information to market to them again. So Book Direct is something that continues to be pushed. On the other hand, a lot of property managers get great success with Airbnb and Vrbo, right? You get more visibility. People don't have to come find you directly. So I think a healthy mix of all booking channels is probably the best way to go to make sure you're getting a diversity of guests, that you're capturing those first-time renters that we had in 2020 and 21 who had never stayed in a vacation rental before. They're not going to go to your direct website. They're going to go to Airbnb or Vrbo or booking the people they've been seeing ads on YouTube for. So if you're not on those sites, you're not going to get those eyes. That being said, if you have a super strong direct strategy and that works for you, and you love it, then keep doing you.
Yeah, are there any thoughts on that from the OTA side?
Yeah, I mean,
direct reservations are going to overtake channels, right?
I know. I don't really have any kind of official stance from booking on this, but I will say the sentiment that I've been hearing just from being in the market and at VRMA and some of the VRMA events last year, I am hearing that sentiment. This is more anecdotal from talking to property managers. So I do believe that is happening. I think that's something that shifted during COVID and the pandemic to, to diversify, really, to have more listings, to also have a direct website. I've actually been surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be from working in the industry, but how many people I talk to, groups I talk to that didn't have a direct website or have a website, but there's no ability to book. So really, I think my impression is that's just one more way, one more kind of tool to put in your toolbox, so to speak. So I definitely do believe from the customer sentiment that that's growing. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's essentially just what I wanted to say between what the two of you said. There's a space for direct reservations, but in terms of acquisition of net new guests, it's unlikely that your SEO is going to outperform the behemoths that are the OTAs. So it's a good channel to have as direct reservations to throw into your mix. But from the Guesty side, it's unheard of that we would see someone with 100% direct bookings. But you also wouldn't necessarily want 100% bookings because unless you have a massive pipeline of net new audience coming into that site, you're closing yourself off from revenue opportunity on other channels if you're only catering to the people that are aware of your direct booking site. So it can be beneficial, but not by itself currently in the market, I would say. Cool. All right. Melanie, jumping back to you. We talked a lot about booking window and kind of keeping an eye on that as a key metric of watching how you're trending and during the next 2 quarters, essentially. Are there other key metrics in your opinion that PMCs and hosts should be keeping a close eye on as an indicator of the health of their business and navigate through the uncertainty going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, should we do like a mini revenue management course here, Keith?
Let's do it.
So I
We
talked
got 4 minutes. Why not?
right, like we've got this. It's not that complicated. I'm kidding, of course. Okay, so there are three main KPIs, key performance indicators. They're the ones I presented today. They're the ones that you should like do the most kind of research and analytics on. The first one's your occupancy rate, how full are your properties. The second one's your average daily rate. What's the average amount of money that a guest is paying to stay with you? So not the average list price, that only matters if it gets booked. So your average daily rate is out of guest nights, what's the average price? And then my favorite, and the one that should be your favorite, is RevPAR, or revenue per available rental. As I said in the presentation, it's the average amount of money coming in for every night. So you're taking all of your revenue, you're averaging across your whole like 30 or 31 day calendar, or 28 because February is weird. RevPAR is going to be a better indicator of how much money you're making, right? It's one of those shifts we've seen where originally everybody was like, if we're not 100% occupied during July, we're failing. Okay, but if you're 100% occupied at $10 a night, then like you're not maximizing revenue. And RevPAR is going to tell you that sweet spot is maybe you're not 100% occupied, which is great for your units. It's great for your cleaning, for your staff. It's less stressful. But your rate's high enough that you're still maximizing revenue. So maybe that happens at 90% occupancy during the peak season or something like that. Right. And like I said, rate only matters if it's being booked, right? If it's too high and it's pushing your occupancy too far down, then your RevPAR is going to start falling. So this is basic like supply demand economics, which I know not everybody is an economics person, but this is not like a concept that's only true for vacation rentals, right? It's about maximizing revenue through RevPAR. As you're looking at that, make sure you're looking at pacing data. So like revenue or occupancy pickup, booking pace, or some of the phrases you're going to hear. So you want to compare, if you're looking at like February or March, you don't want to look at where you were by the end of March last year. You want to look at where you were as of January 19th, 2022. So how are you trending compared to how you were trending this time last year? And then those final values will give you a better understanding of where you can expect to end up. And then if you're not booking for March, then now's the time to start adjusting rates, adjust marketing strategies, things like that to make sure that people start booking for March now.
Wow.
Okay, revenue management in 3 minutes.
That was impressive. That was impressive.
I don't know if it makes sense, but there you go.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time here. So one last shameless plug here in case anyone was not aware. Guesty has our annual conference coming up in May, Guestival. Tickets are now on sale. We're hosting it this year in Tel Aviv, where we're headquartered in Israel. So if you've ever been meaning to visit Tel Aviv or see the Middle East, this is a great opportunity. So if you're interested at learning more about our conference, you can visit guestival.com. But of course, I wanted to thank our two panelists for joining today. Thank all of you for attending and submitting your questions. I apologize if we were not able to get to all of your questions, as we had a lot of participation today, which is always great. But thanks again.